The business model canvas is a fantastic tool for innovators and entrepreneurs, but books, online courses, incubators, and even accelerators all commit a fundamental mistake when it comes to making proper use of it. They all treat the business model canvas as a documentation tool, but that completely misses the point. It's time to think inside the box. Welcome, everyone. I'm Josh David Miller, aka JDM, and this is Inside the Box, a podcast about the metacognition of innovation and entrepreneurship, where we talk about the tools and techniques used to create amazing products and launch high growth startups. Most importantly, we talk about the mindset that successful innovators use to avoid getting in their own way. And today's episode is all about how you're doing the business model canvas all wrong. So let's get to it. So I want to start by talking about what the business model canvas is before we get into how you can misuse it. So what the heck is it? I mean, you're probably already familiar with it. So we're going to go through this part pretty fast, right? It's this thing originally created by Alex Osterwalder and Yves Pigneur. And if you want to explore some basics, I do recommend you get their book called Business Model Generation. I highly recommend it. But I want to talk about how you can put this tool to use right now, today. And before we get to that, I want to take a step back and ask the question, not what is the business model canvas, but what is a business model in the first place? So, a model, whether it's mathematical or conceptual, is just a shared language used to describe something so that we can manipulate it and play with it and surface assumptions about it and so forth. And so, a business model specifically is a conceptual model that we use to describe the four components of a business model. It's a value creation mechanism, a delivery mechanism of somehow for that value, a capture of that value, and a customer, right? So it's value creation, delivery, and capture for a particular customer, right? That's a business model. And that pretty much describes everything about an organization, but at a pretty high level, right? Somebody out there has a problem. We create value for them by solving it. We have to deliver that value to them somehow. And because we're not doing this for free, we have to capture some value in return. That's pretty high altitude. The business model canvas goes one level deeper. So let's dive in, and it might be helpful for you to have one in front of you while you're listening, but it's not required. So the business model canvas is clearly broken down into 9 boxes. And I want to go over those super quickly before we get to the headliner of why this is all being used incorrectly, right? So let's go over these 9 boxes. So starting all the way on the right-hand side, we have customer segments. This is where you document each of the customer types that you serve. Most organizations end up with more than one, and that's okay. Channels adjacent to that are how you deliver value to those customers. Are you sold in stores or bought online, direct sales or indirect sales? Do you own the channels that you use to get to customers, or do you have channel partners? Simply, how do you reach your customers throughout the customer lifecycle? Right? And right above that, we have relationships that you establish with your customers. An app might be completely self service, or you might be a full service provider with a white glove offering, right? How are your customers going to experience you? Those are the customer relationships. And then right at the middle, and with good reason, is the value proposition. This is how you're creating value. The value prop is the reason for doing business together from the customer's perspective. Now, I talk a lot about our effort to gain empathy for our customers. It's understanding their wants, their needs, and their fears, because that lies in the problem that we're trying to solve, right? So let's break it down. When we talk about wants, needs, and fears, we're talking about a want as an aspirational thing. It's what we daydream about. It's emotional, right? What do our customers want? A need is something that we have to get done. Unlike wants, needs are not emotional, they're rational. right? So, what do your customers need, even if maybe they don't know it yet? And a fear is different altogether because a fear is something to be avoided. It can be emotional or it can be rational. It could be fear of missing out. It could be the pain of switching from one tool to another. There are an endless supply of potential fears in any situation. But what makes fears interesting is that they're often hidden. Unlike wants and needs, fears are often beneath the surface. Customers don't always tell us about them. In fact, fears are often the source of wants and needs. And a key goal of empathy is making those fears known so that you can speak to them. Now, we've seen many products fail in the marketplace simply because there was a hidden fear that wasn't addressed. I've seen it tons and tons of times. So, wants, needs, and fears are ways of describing that problem space from our customer's perspective. And it's how we can begin to understand their world. And in design thinking, we have a whole collection of tools for uncovering these. But the best place to start is just by conversations with your customer. And when you get those wants, needs, and fears together, when that resonates, you have a really compelling value proposition for your customer, how you're solving their problem, solving their pain, relieving their fears, and giving them what they want. Okay, so that's value proposition right at the middle, logically so, of our business model canvas. And now moving in to the left side here, we have actually, before we go to the left side, let's finish up on the right side. We have one more box at the bottom, and that's the revenue model or revenue streams. And this probably seems pretty straightforward because it honestly most of the time is, right? For that customer whom you're providing the value, how do they pay you? Right? Is this a fee for service? Is it monthly? There's tons and tons and tons of options here. But what does that revenue logic look like, right? Okay, so now let's continue on. Let's go hopping this time really over to the left side, and we've got key resources, which is also basically what it sounds like. This is all the stuff that you need to run your organization. And that could be specialized staff like developers, or it could be capital, it could be inventory, it could be tons of things that you just need in order to make the business work. You also have right above that key activities. And these are all the processes that you need to run your organization. And some organizations will honestly have very little here. Like if you're a run of the mill app or something, right? There's just not a lot there and it's pretty well understood. But if you're a service company or if you're in manufacturing or anything where process is super important, then this becomes a really relevant place to document key hypotheses about how your business is actually going to run. And then all the way at the left side, we have key partnerships. And these are the organizations outside of your own that are the key to your success. And they aren't vendors, they're partners. And the best way to tell the difference between a vendor and a partner is whether or not they would also call you a partner. If they're not going to refer to you as a partner, then they're just a vendor and you're their customer. Doesn't belong here. It's just a service you're using. We all use tons of services to make our businesses work, but they're not partners. Okay, so the very last box, box number 9 in the bottom left-hand corner, is that doing all of this stuff costs us money, and that's our cost structure. So you may not know the specific numbers if you're pretty early stage in your startup or in your innovative effort, but you want to at least get an hypothesis of where the money's gonna go, right? Of what actually is gonna cost you money. What do the buckets look like that you wanna put that stuff in? Okay, so that's the 9 boxes, and that's a lot of stuff. But the big picture is if you split the business model canvas right down the middle, right through that value proposition box. Because then on the right hand side of the chart is everything that's outside the organization. And on the left side is everything that's inside the organization. And the value proposition is the glue that holds all of that together. It's your promise to your customer. It's your raison d'etre. When customers look to your organization, it should be what they're seeing. They're seeing your value proposition, what you're doing for them. And conversely, when you look from your organization, it should be the very lens through which you see what you're doing for your customers. So it glues the inside the organization and outside the organization together. And outside the organization, that looking from your organization through your value proposition to your customers is where any innovative effort starts. It always starts with customers. But that's a topic for another episode. Okay, so now that's it for what the business model canvas is and what the boxes are. There's plenty more information to be had here, but we're going through this super quick. So let's assume that you've gone through and you've documented your business model inside the canvas. You've put notes in all of the boxes, maybe with sticky notes, maybe with a digital tool. You figured out these are the customers we think we're going to serve, or the customers we're currently serving, and here's our value proposition to them, and here's what it's going to cost, and how we're going to charge money, and here's what we're going to charge. And so you fill out all 9 boxes. So we're done, right? This is an opportunity to commit the biggest mistake of the business model canvas. Most companies make this error. They stop right here. They fill out the business model canvas and then they check this off the to-do list. I did a business model canvas, right? Done. Accelerators and incubators often do this too, because their business model is usually driven by a demo day. They want to get companies from the time that they apply to go through a process where it ends with them presenting to a room full of investors at the end. And demo day is what drives everything. It's the weight that keeps momentum pushing through the program. And in some ways that's fantastic. But the problem is that you start having a week for this topic and then a week for that topic. And as soon as you move on from topic 1, you have to go to topic 2, because then you need to go to topics 3, 4, and 5 so that you can get to demo day, because demo day is happening on a particular day, no matter what. So when it comes time to talk about the business model canvas, it becomes a theme for the week. We go and we learn what they are and we fill out our current hypotheses and we document it, and then we move on. To that I say, no, man, this is a living document. What we're putting inside of these boxes is not facts. We're not putting information that we know for sure. We're putting in hypotheses. We're putting in assumptions. And then we need to be revising those assumptions over time and making new hypotheses to test. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So to rewind a second, when we're talking about innovation, in other words, when we're talking about not doing some business model that's already running and already proving, like selling cars or flipping burgers or doing a Subway franchise or something like that, when we're not doing something that's really well known, then absolutely everything about our business model, every single thing that we write down on the canvas is an hypothesis. And another word for hypothesis is assumption. And I'll spare you the what assumption makes out of you and me, and just move into that some of these items will have a pretty high degree of uncertainty about, and other items will feel, pretty certain about, right? We'll have some greater or lesser certainty about the assumptions that we put onto the canvas. Some will be really, really sure about, and others will be, maybe wild guesses. And that's totally okay, because in the context of innovation, what we're always doing with the business model canvas at first is documenting our hypotheses. We're trying to get everything out of our heads and put it down in a systematic way. But we're almost never documenting facts. And that means that must translate to the business model canvas not being a destination, but a process. So you and your team, you get together, you threw some things down on paper and they sound reasonable, right? But as Steve Blank likes to say, there are no facts inside the building, only opinions and ideas. And our job, the job of an innovator, the job of an entrepreneur, is to one by one systematically test those hypotheses, revise, pivot or persevere, come up with new hypotheses, and evolve our business model over time. So just as a process perspective, let me talk you through how this actually works. So you have a business model canvas full of assumptions. What you want to do is find a way to test your riskiest hypothesis first. You want to test the riskiest hypothesis as quickly and as cheaply as possible, because if you're wrong, and you're going to be wrong about a lot of these hypotheses, then you want to find out before investing $500,000 in 2 years of your life. Another reason is that when one box changes because you learned something wasn't right, the business model revenue wasn't quite perfect. Customers didn't want to pay a subscription fee. They instead wanted to pay per transaction or something like that. When you start to do that, any box you change also tends to change other boxes. So if you're not constantly revising the business model canvas with new information, suddenly you're going to end up in a place where certain parts of your business are just wrong. They just don't fit, and it's not always clear why. So, when you are really early in the process, you basically want to be making a new business model canvas every time you learn something new. And in a really early stage startup, an active endeavor, or a corporate project that we're trying to get off the ground, this new innovation that we're building up from scratch, we're probably building out a new business model canvas, maybe even every week, at least every month. And you should end up with this huge stack of them sitting on your desk. Do you remember those flip books where you would have a comic or cartoon and they'd draw one frame of the animation on any one page and you'd thumb through it? And as you did, the pages would fall and it would animate as you flipped through this book. You want to have a whole stack of business model canvases that document what you've done over time, and they become like the flip book of your business model. They tell the story of your startup as you go through the entire process. And as you thumb through each successive version, the story of everything that's happened along the way completely unfolds. So, just in terms of process, I want to spend just a couple of minutes talking about what we mean when we talk about finding our riskiest assumption and then finding a way to test it. Because that's really the crux of this, of the process, what sits at the middle. So let's start with finding your riskiest assumption. What we mean by that is if you take absolutely everything that you have listed on the business model canvas, you have not only a whole set of assumptions that you wrote down, but also in the things that you wrote down are buried assumptions as well. If you're assuming that the customer wants something, behind that is probably some rationale for that you're assuming, some want, need, or fear that you are thinking is happening for a particular reason. And buried in all of that are more assumptions. And so we want to surface as many of these assumptions as possible, just tons and tons of them. We'll have dozens and dozens on a business model canvas that we can surface out. And then we want to start ranking them. We want to rank them on two factors. We want to rank them similarly to how we were talking last week when we were talking about finding new market opportunities. We want to rank these assumptions based on how risky they are, which means how uncertain they are, right? And how impactful they are, because that's what risk is. Risk is the combination of uncertainty and impact. So you want to take all of those assumptions and find the one or two assumptions that are so risky, because if you're wrong about them, then it kind of sinks what you're working on. The whole thing, house of cards, collapse. And it's so risky because we really don't have a lot of data to base this on. And so we're kind of just making the assumption and hoping that it works. So we find the assumptions that we're really uncertain about, and that if we're wrong about them, we're kind of in trouble. Those are our riskiest assumptions. And we surface those and we figure out how we test them. We design little experiments that we get in front of customers. We do research with our customers. We do quantitative research. We do qualitative research. We do these little experiments. We can run ad campaigns. We can do surveys. We can just get on the phone and talk to them. We can run all kinds of different experiments to validate different kinds of assumptions. And so what we want to do from a process perspective is we take that really risky assumption and we turn it into an hypothesis, right? An hypothesis puts measurement behind an assumption. It says, here's what we think is true quantitatively, right? And then we design an experiment that it either passes or fails. It either validates that the hypothesis that we made was correct, or it invalidates the hypothesis as incorrect. And then based on either one of those two pieces of information, we go back and revise our business model canvas. This is the build, measure, learn loop. We go out and do something, we build something, we run an experiment, we measure the result, and we learn from it. The business model canvas is sitting in that. Because every single time you go and revise that canvas by incorporating new data that you got out of an experiment, it's time to find the next riskiest assumption because the whole thing changed. And now that the whole thing changed, we say, okay, here are some new assumptions. These assumptions we can get rid of. And now that we have a whole collection of new assumptions, some of which are maybe still sitting there, then we can figure out which one is really uncertain and really impactful if we're wrong. And we grab that assumption, we design an experiment for it. And we keep doing that over and over and over and over again until everything on the business model canvas becomes kind of set in stone, until everything becomes certain or more certain because we have data behind it, right? And we keep doing that until we have product market fit. When that business model canvas looks solid, when all of the data backs up all of the points, that's when you have product market fit. And then after you have product market fit, as your company continues to grow and you start to consider innovation, we do this whole process again. Because this is the key. The business model canvas is a process that you engage in. It's the painting that's never done. So grab a brush, get yourself some splashy colors, and start painting. And that's all for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. As you know, podcasts grow by word of mouth. So if you found this helpful or hopefully interesting, I would really appreciate it if you'd mention it to your friends and spread the word through social media. If you haven't already, please also leave us a review on whatever platform you're listening to us on right now. And if you have any questions, as always, you can reach us at podcast@rightbox.co. We read every message we get, and we love hearing from you. Until next time.